One night you go to sleep in your home. The next morning, everything has changed. Across California right now, thousands of renters are waking up to notices they never expected: rent hikes, lease changes, and eviction threats that are turning ordinary families' lives completely upside down. And the most terrifying part, this crackdown didn't come with a warning, and the last few months alone, 10 California cities have become ground zero for what housing experts. But here's what the landlords and property investors don't want you to know: there is a hidden war happening behind closed doors, inside courtrooms, and on city council floors that is deciding the future of millions of California renters. Regular working people, nurses, teachers, warehouse workers, and single parents are being systematically squeezed out of the cities they built with their own hands. We investigated all 10 cities, and what we found is deeply alarming. Some of these places were once considered affordable safe havens, the last options for families with nowhere else to turn. Now even those final refuges are disappearing. If you are a renter in California, or you know someone who is, you absolutely cannot afford to miss what comes next. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you will know exactly what is happening. Number 10. Los Angeles. Los Angeles is burning, not with fire, but with a rental crisis so severe that even longtime residents who have called this city home for decades are being forced to pack their bags and leave. And when we say overnight crackdown, we mean it literally. Tenants across LA are reporting that landlord behavior changed almost immediately after new city ordinance debates hit the headlines, as if property owners decided to act before the rules could stop them. Here is the reality on the ground right now. Los Angeles has over 600,000 rent-stabilized units, which sounds like great protection until you realize that landlords have discovered a loophole so widely used it has its own name. It's called a soft eviction. Your landlord doesn't hand you a formal eviction notice. Instead, they stop fixing things. The heating breaks and stays broken. The hallway lights go out and nobody comes. Suddenly there are construction notices, inspection delays, and mysterious letters that create just enough pressure and confusion to make you want to leave on your own. It's calculated, it's deliberate, and it is completely destroying communities. What makes Los Angeles the most alarming city on our entire list is the sheer human scale of what's happening. We are not talking about a few hundred people being displaced. We are talking about entire neighborhoods, generations of families, small business owners, elderly residents on fixed incomes, being erased from the city they helped build. Tenant complaint filings have surged by over 40% in recent months, and the city's housing department is so overwhelmed they can barely keep up. Working people who commute an hour each way, raise their kids here, and pay their taxes here are being told, not in words, but in actions, that Los Angeles is no longer for them. Now we want to hear from you. Drop the name of your city in the comments below and tell us what rents are doing in your neighborhood, because your story could be our next video. If this video gave you information you needed, please subscribe to our channel. It genuinely takes just one single click, and it means the world to a team that works tirelessly to bring you the truth that others won't. Number 9. San Francisco. San Francisco is supposed to be the city of innovation, opportunity, and dreams. But right now, for thousands of renters, it has become a city of impossible choices, crushing pressure, and silent desperation. What is happening here is not just a housing crisis. It is a full-scale transformation of who gets to live in one of the world's most iconic cities, and ordinary people are losing that battle badly. Here is something that will genuinely shake you. San Francisco has some of the strongest tenant protection laws in the entire United States, and yet the displacement is still happening at a breathtaking speed. Because landlords have found something far more powerful than eviction notices. They are simply pulling rental units off the market entirely, converting apartments into condos, listing them on short-term vacation rental platforms, leaving them deliberately vacant rather than renting to long-term tenants under rent control. The laws exist, but the housing is disappearing right around them, and renters are left with absolutely nowhere to turn. The human cost of this is something the statistics alone cannot fully capture. Teachers who have taught San Francisco's children for 20 years are commuting from cities an hour away because they cannot afford to stay. Nurses working double shifts at the city's hospitals are sharing one-bedroom apartments with 3 other adults just to survive. The median rent for a single one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco now sits at a staggering $3,200 every single month, a number so brutal that even households with 2 working adults are finding themselves just one unexpected bill away from losing everything. San Francisco is not just pricing out the poor anymore. It is systematically eliminating its own middle class, and the city will never be the same once they are gone. Number 8. San Diego. San Diego was supposed to be the escape route, the affordable, sunny alternative for families who couldn't survive the brutal costs of Los Angeles and San Francisco. But that escape route has officially been sealed shut, and the people who moved here looking for relief are now trapped in a crisis they never saw coming. What is unfolding in San Diego right now is the kind of story that makes you question everything you thought you knew about California's promise of a better life. Here is the fact that stopped our entire research team cold. San Diego's rental prices have exploded by over 30% in just 4 years, making it one of the fastest-rising rental markets in the entire country. And while city officials have scrambled to pass new just-cause eviction protections, the cruel reality is that thousands of renters don't even know those protections exist. They are signing unfair lease agreements, accepting illegal rent increases, and walking away from apartments they had every legal right to keep, simply because nobody told them they had a choice. But what truly separates San Diego from every other city on this list is a crisis happening completely beneath the surface, one that involves some of the most dedicated and selfless people in this country. San Diego is home to one of the largest military communities in the entire United States, and right now, active service members and their families are being priced out of the city where they are stationed. These are men and women serving this country on fixed housing allowances that have not kept pace with skyrocketing rents. Families are living in extended stay hotels. Some are making daily cross-border commutes from Tijuana just to afford a roof over their heads. The people defending this country cannot afford to live in it, and that should make every single one of us furious. Number 7. Sacramento. Sacramento is the city where California's laws are written, debated, and signed into existence, and yet right now, the very people who clean the Capitol buildings, serve food in the nearby restaurants, and drive the buses that carry lawmakers to work cannot afford to live anywhere close to the city they serve every single day. If that does not tell you everything you need to know about how broken the system truly is, then nothing will. Here is the jaw-dropping reality that most people completely miss about Sacramento. This city absorbed a massive tidal wave of refugees, not from another country, but from the Bay Area. When San Francisco and Oakland became financially unbearable, hundreds of thousands of remote workers, young families, and middle-class households packed their belongings and flooded into Sacramento looking for breathing room. And for a brief moment, they found it. But what they didn't realize was that they brought the crisis with them. Their Bay Area salaries allowed them to outbid local Sacramento renters at every single turn, and almost overnight, a city that working-class families had called affordable for generations became completely unrecognizable. The numbers tell a story that is almost impossible to believe. Sacramento rents surged nearly 25% in just 2 years, a speed of increase so violent that local families simply had no time to adjust, save, or plan. And here is the part that cuts the deepest. This explosion happened in the shadow of the California state capitol itself. Tenant advocacy groups are literally walking the halls of the building where housing laws are made, begging for relief, while their own members are receiving eviction notices just a few miles down the road. Politicians are debating affordable housing legislation, while the people who need that legislation most are sleeping in their cars outside. Sacramento is not just a housing crisis. It is a crisis of conscience. Number 6. Long Beach. Long Beach is a city that has always prided itself on being real. Real people, real communities, real working-class families who show up every single day, put in the hours, and ask for nothing more than a decent and stable place to call home. But right now, that quiet dignity is being ripped away from thousands of Long Beach renters in a way that is so calculated, so deliberate, and so ruthless that housing experts are struggling to find the right words to describe it. And what is replacing those communities will shock you to your core. Here is what makes Long Beach's situation uniquely devastating compared to every other city we have covered so far. Long Beach actually fought back. The city passed one of the toughest local rent control ordinances in all of Southern California, capping annual rent increases at just 3% for older multifamily units, and for a moment, it felt like a real victory for ordinary renters. But landlords are not ordinary people with ordinary resources. They hired lawyers, studied the fine print, and found a loophole so widely exploited it has become practically an epidemic. Owner move-in evictions. A landlord legally claims that they or a family member plan to move into your unit, forcing you out completely, only to quietly re-rent that same apartment at full market rate just months later. It is fraud. It is heartless. And it is happening on street after street across Long Beach right now. What makes this even more painful is who is being targeted. Long Beach has one of the largest immigrant and working-class communities in Southern California. People who work double shifts at the port, in warehouses, in hospitals, and in kitchens. People who trusted that the law would protect them. Instead, they are discovering that having a law and actually being protected by that law are two very different things. Entire multi-generational families are being separated, displaced, and scattered, and the neighborhood bonds built over decades are being destroyed in a matter of months. Number 5. Oakland. Oakland is a city with a soul, a deep, powerful, unbreakable soul built by generations of artists, activists, immigrants, and working families who chose this city not because it was easy, but because it was theirs. But right now, that soul is being auctioned off to the highest bidder, one eviction notice at a time, one rent hike at a time, one displaced family at a time, and the speed at which Oakland is being transformed is nothing short of a cultural catastrophe that will take generations to recover from. The city that gave birth to some of America's most powerful social movements is now fighting the biggest battle of its own existence. Here is the brutal truth about what is driving Oakland's crisis that nobody in mainstream media wants to talk about openly. The tech industry didn't just price people out of San Francisco, it sent a financial shockwave directly into Oakland that hit renters like a freight train. As tech workers flooded across the Bay Bridge looking for relatively affordable housing, property investors followed right behind them, buying up buildings, flipping units, and converting affordable rentals into luxury apartments at a pace that left long-time Oakland residents completely breathless. Entire neighborhoods that were affordable just 5 years ago are now completely unrecognizable. Families who have lived on the same block for 30 years are suddenly surrounded by wine bars and co-working spaces, and receiving rent increases they could never in a million years afford to pay. But here is what makes Oakland genuinely different from every other city on this list. The people are fighting back with everything they have. Community organizations are holding emergency Know Your Rights workshops in church basements. Neighborhood groups are organizing rent strikes that are making national headlines. Residents are showing up at city council meetings in numbers that are impossible to ignore. Oakland is not going quietly. But fighting back takes energy, resources, and time. And for families already working 2 jobs just to survive, that fight comes at an enormous and exhausting personal cost that the outside world rarely sees or appreciates. Number 4. Riverside. Riverside was the promise that California made to every working family that got left behind by the coastal elite. A promise that said if you are willing to drive a little further, endure a little more heat, and sacrifice a little comfort, you will find a place where your paycheck actually stretches, your children can grow up with stability, and the dream of a decent life is still within reach. That promise has now been completely and utterly broken. And the way it was broken, quietly, systematically, and without a single apology, is one of the most infuriating stories in this entire video. Here is the cold hard reality that defines Riverside's crisis in a way that is almost impossible to wrap your mind around. Riverside didn't just get hit by California's housing crisis, it got hit twice. First, it absorbed tens of thousands of families fleeing unaffordable coastal cities, which drove up demand and pushed rents to levels locals had never seen before. Then, just as those newly arrived families were beginning to settle in and breathe again, the same wave of price increases that destroyed their previous neighborhoods caught up with them all over again. There was nowhere left to run. Riverside was the last stop, and now even the last stop is out of reach for ordinary people. But there is a deeply troubling layer to Riverside's crisis that goes almost entirely unreported, and it involves the city's massive student population. You see, Riverside brings tens of thousands of young renters into the market every single year. Students on tight budgets, many renting for the very first time, with little knowledge of their legal rights and even less financial leverage to push back. Predatory landlords have identified this population as the perfect target. Mold-covered walls, broken heating systems, pest infestations, and ignored maintenance requests are shockingly common in student-adjacent neighborhoods, and when students dare to complain, landlords respond with lease non-renewal threats that silence them almost immediately. Young people trying to build a future are being exploited at the very moment they are most vulnerable, and that is something that should make every decent person absolutely furious. We want to hear from every student and young renter watching this right now. Drop your age and city in the comments below and tell us how much of your monthly income goes straight to rent, because we are putting together something big and your numbers will genuinely change the conversation. Every single video on this channel is built on real research, real stories, and a real commitment to giving renters the voice they deserve, so please subscribe right now. It takes one click, costs you absolutely nothing, and tells us that this work truly matters. Number 3. Stockton. Stockton has already survived the unthinkable once before. This is the city that made international headlines when it became the largest American city ever to declare bankruptcy, a moment so painful and so public that it left deep scars on every family, every neighborhood, and every small business that called this place home. Stockton fought its way back from that edge with sheer determination and community strength. But right now, a brand new crisis is threatening to undo every single bit of that hard-won recovery. And this time, the enemy is not a financial collapse. It is a rental market so cruel and so merciless that it is pushing Stockton's most vulnerable residents completely off the edge. And the world is barely paying attention. Here is the number that puts everything into devastating perspective. Rents in Stockton have climbed over 20% in just 3 years, in a city where the average household income is among the lowest in the entire state of California. Think about what that actually means in real human terms. A $200 monthly rent increase sounds almost laughably small when you read it in a headline. But for a single mother earning $35,000 a year, working double shifts at a warehouse or a hospital, that $200 is the difference between keeping the electricity on or sitting in the dark with her children. It is the difference between putting food on the table or going to bed hungry. It is the difference between having a home and living in a car. These are not dramatic exaggerations. These are the actual choices that real Stockton families are making right now, today, while the rest of California looks the other way. And then there is the landlord problem that is silently strangling Stockton's neighborhoods from the inside out. Unlike coastal cities where at least some landlords live locally and have some connection to the community, Stockton has become a feeding ground for absentee investment landlords, faceless corporations, and out-of-state investors who purchase properties purely as financial assets and have absolutely zero emotional connection to the families living inside them. Properties are deteriorating. Repairs go ignored for months. Tenants live in genuinely unsafe conditions but stay completely silent out of sheer terror that complaining will trigger an eviction that leaves them with nowhere else to go. In Stockton, the fear of homelessness has become the landlord's most powerful weapon, and they are using it with absolutely ruthless efficiency. Number 2. Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara is the kind of place that appears on postcards, movie screens, and luxury travel magazines. A breathtaking stretch of California coastline where the mountains meet the ocean, the weather is almost impossibly perfect, and the streets feel like something out of a dream. But behind every perfectly photographed sunset and every charming red-roofed building, there is a hidden world of quiet desperation, impossible sacrifices, and slow-burning heartbreak that the tourism brochures will never show you. Because the people who make Santa Barbara actually function, who cook its food, heal its sick, teach its children, and keep its streets clean, are being systematically and mercilessly pushed out of the city they have dedicated their entire lives to serving. Here is the single most alarming statistic about Santa Barbara that stopped our research team completely in its tracks. Santa Barbara County holds the devastating distinction of having the highest ratio of jobs to available housing units in the entire state of California. Read that again and let it truly sink in. There are dramatically more people who need to live here for work than there are homes available for them to live in. This is not a minor imbalance or a temporary inconvenience. This is a structural catastrophe that has been building for decades while city leaders look the other way, protected by walls of wealth and neighborhoods full of homeowners who voted against every single affordable housing proposal that ever came near them. The human stories emerging from Santa Barbara right now are the kind that stay with you long after you stop watching. Teachers who have spent 20 years shaping the minds of Santa Barbara's children are commuting 2 to 3 hours each way from distant inland cities because there is simply no rental they can afford anywhere near the schools where they work. Hospital nurses are sleeping in their cars between shifts in parking garages rather than face a 2-hour drive home at midnight after a 12-hour shift. Several major employers in the area have become so desperate to retain workers that they have launched private shuttle bus services just to bring employees in from distant cities every single morning, because they cannot find staff willing to endure the financial punishment of living near their workplace. Santa Barbara is not just failing its renters. It is failing its own future, hollowing itself out from the inside while maintaining a beautiful and carefully polished surface for the outside world to admire. Number 1. Bakersfield. Every crisis needs a final frontier, a last remaining place where ordinary people can retreat when everything else has been taken from them, where the cost of simply existing doesn't consume every dollar they earn, and where the dream of stability feels like something still within reach. 4 millions of low-income Californians who have been systematically pushed out of city after city, neighborhood after neighborhood, Bakersfield has been that final frontier. The last affordable city. The last real option. The last hope. And right now, that last hope is being destroyed, quietly, rapidly, and with absolutely devastating consequences for the most vulnerable people in the entire state. Here is what makes Bakersfield's situation not just serious, but genuinely catastrophic in a way that separates it from every single other city we have covered in this video. When rents rise in Los Angeles, people move to Sacramento. When Sacramento becomes unaffordable, people move to Stockton. When Stockton gets too expensive, people move to Bakersfield. But when Bakersfield falls, and it is falling right now, there is absolutely nowhere left to go. This is the end of the line. The final domino. And it is tipping over in slow motion while the rest of California refuses to watch. Rents in Bakersfield have surged over 20% in just 3 years, in a city where average wages are among the lowest in the state, where agricultural and oil industry jobs dominate, and where families have historically lived paycheck to paycheck with zero financial cushion to absorb any kind of shock whatsoever. But what is driving Bakersfield's collapse goes far deeper than simple supply and demand economics, and this is the part that will genuinely break your heart. Bakersfield is now absorbing what researchers are beginning to call California's climate refugees, thousands of families displaced not by rising rents but by actual physical devastation. Wildfires that destroyed entire Northern California towns. Droughts that wiped out agricultural livelihoods overnight. Flooding that made whole communities completely uninhabitable. These families arrived in Bakersfield with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the desperate hope that this city would give them a second chance. Instead, they arrived just in time to watch the last affordable market in California begin to collapse around them. These are people who lost everything to natural disasters, only to lose their housing stability all over again to an economic disaster, and the cruelty of that double blow is something that words can barely begin to capture. We started this video with a simple but devastating question. What happens when the last affordable city falls? And now, after traveling through 10 California cities, 10 unique stories of struggle, displacement, and quiet desperation, you already know the answer. The answer is that real people, not statistics, not data points, not abstract policy discussions, but real breathing human beings with families, dreams, and decades of roots in their communities, are being pushed to the absolute edge of survival. And the most heartbreaking truth of everything we uncovered today is that this did not have to happen. California is not a poor state. This is the 5th largest economy on the entire planet Earth. The resources, the talent, the creativity, and the political power needed to solve this crisis have always existed here. But somewhere along the way, the people making decisions chose the interests of investors, developers, and wealthy homeowners over the basic human need for shelter, and millions of ordinary renters are now paying the devastating price for those choices every single month with money they simply do not have. But here is what we need you to carry with you after this video ends and you go back to your own life. Knowledge is not just power, it is protection. Every renter who understands their legal rights is a renter who is harder to exploit, harder to intimidate, and harder to push out. Every family that knows what protections exist for them is a family that can fight back with confidence and clarity. The landlords and investors are counting on your silence. They are counting on your confusion. They are counting on you not knowing what we just told you today. So share this video. Talk about it. Send it to every renter you know. Because the only way this crisis changes is when enough people wake up, stand together, and refuse to be pushed out quietly. Disclaimer. The information provided in this video is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. If you are facing eviction or a housing dispute, please consult a qualified tenant rights attorney or contact your local legal aid organization immediately.